And I've had many reports that last Sunday was just a great day. And that thrills my heart. Just not even going to lie, that just thrills my heart. Well, I think at this time we will dismiss our kids. Yes, no, yes? Yes, I saw that. That's awesome. I like that. There you go. Yes, no, that's yes. So kids, if you want to make your way to kids' church, then head out the back door. Miss Kathy's got some grief and sorrow in mind. No. It'll be a great day. You guys have a lot of fun. I hope not just the kids. Okay, adults don't get to go. Okay. I want to give a bit of a preface before I begin this morning. Been working on the sermon for 2 weeks, and I've played it over and over and over in my head. And you know how it is when you play something over and over and over in your head, that sometimes you kind of get stuck there. And this morning I found myself kind of being informed that I may stick to my sermon notes, I may not. So I'm just going to tell you that I think we'll still get out in time to be the Baptist buffet, so I think we'll be okay there. But I want to just let you know that sermon notes, if you're going to follow along in your bulletins with completing sermon notes, I may or may not stay on task, but we'll see what happens there. Okay. So part of our trip this past week, we got the chance to spend a couple of days, Sharon and Shelby and I, to go to many of the sites in Washington, D.C. One of those sites was the Arlington National Cemetery, which is the home of the tomb of the unknown soldier. And we took a tram, and in that trip, we got a chance to get there to the amphitheater, to walk in and witness the changing of the guard ceremony. And I think we got something to pull up back there. There we go. It was really, really cool to witness this. We were told on the tram, when you get there, keep your lips zipped, because they're not really fond of what they call private conversation being made public. So we said that's fine. So we got there to the amphitheater, and as we are as we go around the amphitheater, which was, by the way, was beautiful, we get to the back of the amphitheater, and there was what I want to call a sanctuary of the tomb of the unknown soldier. It was a sanctuary because there was a holy hush. Kid you not, there was a holy hush. And for those of you that have been there and visited, you know what I'm talking about. It's a holy hush. And we got there just as the changing of the guard was taking place. And you'll notice in the videos, I mean, they are spot on. They look to the nines. These three guards look absolutely phenomenal. Everything about what they do and say and act is absolutely on spot. So the ceremony itself consists of three guards, three soldiers. The first is the soldier who is currently at post. He is currently on guard. He is on the duty of guarding the post. The second soldier acts as a sentinel, and he is kind of the one, and I'm speaking as a layman, someone who's never been in the military. So some of you who have been in the military are going to want to, correct me, and that's fine. But from what I understand as laymen, he basically oversaw the transition of the change of the guard. And then the third was the guard who was coming in as the replacement guard. And you can see by the ceremony, I mean, it is on task. And so this is the sentinel, and he's now approaching the incoming soldier. And what he does is he approaches him, and the incoming soldier presents his weapon, and the sentinel begins to do an inspection. And he goes over this weapon top to bottom. And you'll notice he's wearing white gloves, and if you watch him, what he'll do is he will take the weapon, he'll rub certain parts, and then he'll look at his fingers, And he'll say, is there anything there to see? Nope. Okay, we're good. Let's go on to the next spot. And he will do a complete white glove inspection of the weapon to make sure that it is completely clean. Now, once he's done with the inspection of the weapon, he then goes on, and I'll just let you know, it'll just come up in just a second video. He will then go on to the wardrobe of the incoming soldier to make sure that everything is as it is supposed to be. And the sentinel will look at the soldier, and you'll see him, he will make complete contact, eye contact with the physical body. Is the cover, is it crisp? Is his suit coat, his uniform jacket, is it pressed? Are the buttons polished? Are the shoulders firm? He'll look down at his trousers in just a bit, and you'll see that he inspects the trousers to make sure that they are pressed and clean. And then he'll look on down and he'll look at the shoes of the soldier. Are they polished? And then after he's checked out the front of the incoming soldier, he'll then walk around to the back of the soldier. And it'll be then when he looks at the back and he says the same thing. Is the cap looking good? Are the shoulders looking good? Is the back looking good? Are the trousers pressed? It's a full inspection that he does. And once he's done with this, then they're able to move on to the next part. And what he's looking for is this. Is this incoming soldier prepared for the task that he is about to undertake? Is this incoming soldier, is he prepared for the responsibility of guarding the tomb of the unknown soldier? Upon complete inspection, what will happen is that the sentinel will oversee the transition. The current guard will step back, the incoming guard will step forward, and then the sentinel will, in a sense, escort out the relieved soldier. And the thing that the sentinel is looking for in the inspection is this incoming soldier prepared for the task of guarding the tomb of the unknown soldier? Today we're going to talk about this word prepared. And what we find in John chapter 13 is that Jesus prepares his disciples for what is to come. And we're going to talk about that in just a moment. But before we do, I'd like to ask you to pray. Just the sanctity of our sanctuary. Father in heaven, I thank you for your favor. I thank you for your love. Thank you for the church, which is the body of the bride of Christ. Father, today I pray that you be present in our midst. I ask that, God, that you be in complete control. Father, I've got a little bit of a plan on where I want to go today. God, I pray for your anointing in your direction and wisdom. God, I pray. This is powerful stuff. So, God, I pray. What goes out is what you've anointed to be. Thank you, Jesus. Everybody say that. John chapter 13, if you have your Bibles, I want to pop it open. Today we're going to begin the first of a two-part sermon series based upon the question that Jesus asks in John 13. When he asks the question, do you understand what I have done? Now, that said, let me just begin with this. Verses 1 through 3 in John chapter 13. John presents 6 key things that Jesus knows. These are 6 key things that Jesus knows that really, for the reader, sets them up to understand what exactly is the setting that Jesus is in at this particular moment. What's going on in the life of the story that Jesus is a part of. And so before we can get into what happens after, we have to look at these 6 things that Jesus knows. So I'm going to try to work through them pretty quickly. I said before the Baptist, right? Okay. So let's just work through really quickly, okay? The first thing that Jesus knows that John records is that Jesus knew the Passover celebration was going to begin soon. What's the Passover celebration? Well, it basically is a celebration, a 1-week celebration, remembering, as commanded, how God led the people of Israel out of bondage in Egypt. And if you remember the story in Exodus chapter 12 about how the Lord commands to Moses, tell my people to sacrifice a lamb, blood on their doorposts, eat the lamb in haste, unleavened bread. I'll let you fill in the blanks. It's Exodus chapter 12. But one of the verses in this is really key. It says this, the Lord says to Moses, this is a day to remember. Each year, from generation to generation, you must celebrate it as a special festival to the Lord. This is a law for all time. So that's what they were doing. They were celebrating the Passover, and it was about to begin really soon. In fact, in Luke 22:8, Jesus sends Peter and John, go to a place I'm telling you to go to begin to prepare for the Passover meal. I mean, it's about to begin, and Jesus knows this. The second thing that Jesus knows is that his hour had come to leave this world and return to his Father. In other words, his time on earth is almost over. And we know as Jesus is about to die, but I love this idea that John writes that Jesus doesn't stop existing whenever his physical body stops. I love that. By the way, that's good food for us, is that as children of God, when this body stops existing, we continue, because we'll be with our Father. The third thing that Jesus knows is that he knows that he loved his disciples. He loved these disciples. They were his friends, and it was a deep, best friend type of kind of relationship with them. And John says not only does he love his disciples, but he's going to love them all the way to the end. That was obvious to John. The fourth thing that Jesus knows is that it's currently supper time. Remember, Jesus had sent Peter and John to the room to prepare the Passover meal. And that's what they were doing. They were enjoying that meal. In fact, Luke 22:15, Jesus says this, I've been very eager to eat this Passover meal with you before my suffering begins. This was a big deal. The fifth thing that Jesus knows is that the devil has already prompted Judas, son of Simon Iscariot, to betray Jesus. In other words, the enemy was rallying an offensive. He was about to make his grand attack. The game was still in play, and there was time on the clock for one more play, one more thing to happen, but it was about done. The wheels were in motion. It's about to stop. And the sixth thing that Jesus knew is that the Father had given him the authority over everything, and that he had come from God and would return to God. In other words, the game was almost over. The enemy was rallying an offensive, and there was time for one more play, but Jesus knew that he was more than qualified to make that play. So let me give you an analogy, and for those of you that are sports people, you already know I'm not a sports guy, but I love this story. In June of 1998, the Utah Jazz and the Chicago Bulls were playing Game 7 of the NBA championship. The reason why it went to Game 7 is because they were tied with 3 games apiece in this tournament. The score is 85-86. The Utah Jazz is ahead by 1 point. And there's 5 seconds left on the clock. And there's time for one play left. Let me just ask you, who do you think is the most qualified person on the team of the Chicago Bulls to make that final play? Who do you think? Say it out loud. Michael Jordan. That's right. He is the most qualified person to make the final play of the game. And that's what he does. With 5 seconds left on the clock, he jukes his defender, pulls back, and he puts up a 17-foot jump shot. Makes the shot. Clock runs out. The Bulls make the game. They win the tournament. This is kind of the scenario that we find in these 6 things that we know, is that the game is about done. The story is about over. The enemy is making a final offensive charge, and there's time for really one more play left. And Jesus knows, I'm the most qualified person to make this play. And I'm going to make this play. Knowing all of this, you feel the energy, don't you? You feel the excitement and the emotion in these 6 things. And knowing these 6 things, Jesus takes action. In his course of action, he wraps a towel around his waist and he washes his disciples' feet. Now, I don't know about you, but for me, it seems a little bit off. It's almost like the equivalent of Michael Jordan with 5 seconds left saying, all right, guys, everybody, hold on just a second. I need to wash some feet, all right? Utah Jazz, come here. Karl Malone, John Stockton, referee. I want to wash some feet. Okay. Sounds stupid, yeah? Sounds kind of like, this is irrelevant. This is like, so, wow. Jesus washes the feet of his disciples in the midst of the most crucial part of the game. What's up with that? Unless there is something key and significant about this event of washing feet. There was something that was profound and of significant importance in Jesus washing the feet of his disciples. Now, that said, we're going to have maybe a little bit of fun. There's 3 primary traditions of foot washing customs in Bible history. There's actually more than that, but there's 3 primary ones that biblical historians share with us. And so I want to just kind of quickly try to work through them a little bit. The first one is this. It's a foot washing custom called hygiene. Hygiene. Now, some of you already, let's just be honest, okay? You get home from work and you've been on your feet all day long, and you come home and you're tired and you sit down in your recliner, and when you do, it's like, ugh, right? And then you bend over, you untie your shoes, and you pull your shoes on, yeah? And maybe your spouse or your child is sitting right there. Go ahead with that fabulous video footage. And as you're sitting there, yeah. You're like, go wash your feet, man. I think there's some more. Go wash your feet. But this is a very real. Okay, all right. This is a very real ritual, a custom. You've been on your feet all day. You come home, you take off them shoes, and you're going to go wash your feet. You might even soak them in some Epsom salt. You might even spray them down real good with Gold Bond medicated foot powder, or go get a pedicure. That poor lady. Now, some of you might be like me. That's really funny because I know of one person. They're not here today. I know one person, when you start talking about feet, she says, we can't talk about feet. She has this real bad gag reflex about start talking about feet. You start talking about touching feet and dirty feet. She starts getting all, something's getting ready to happen, you know what I mean? But hygiene is a pretty serious thing. Imagine, because back in Jesus' day, the primary mode of transportation was walking in. So, washing feet was pretty serious. if you had to go anywhere, you walked there, and I'm sure that taking care of your feet then was probably more of a reason to wash them than even today. So, did Jesus wash his disciples' feet because of hygiene? I don't know. Let's think for a second. Jesus is sitting there eating dinner at the supper table and all ready. All right, who is it? I can't even finish my meal. Somebody's feet stink so bad I can't handle this anymore. Come here, line up. I'm going to wash your feet. I don't care who it is. I can't even finish my meal. I've lost my appetite because your feet stink too bad. Can you see Jesus saying that? Kind of funny if he did. In fact, I see Jesus as having that kind of sense of humor. He probably. The second setting for foot washing that we find in the scriptures is one of hospitality. First there's hygiene, and there's hospitality. And if you were in your home and you had guests come to your home, then it was customary to bring maybe a wash basin like this one and a pitcher of water and a towel and give a chance for your guests to wash their feet. And if you happen to have a servant, then you would offer the servant to wash their feet for them. That was just hospitality of the day. I mean, you find Abraham living this out himself in Genesis 18. It says that he was sitting underneath the shade tree when he sees off in the distance 3 godly, angelic men coming down the road to him. And when they get to him, he says to them, "Hey, why don't you guys have a seat under my tree? And I'm going to go get some water for you to wash your feet." I mean, he was just being a good host. It was the hospitable thing to do. And then Jesus, in Luke 7, he kind of bags on his host. Simon the Pharisee had invited him over for dinner. And Jesus comments to him saying, "Hey, I come into your house and you don't even have water for my feet. And yet this woman who has been crying over my feet and wiping my feet up with her hair and pouring perfume over my feet, she's been a better host than you have, and she's not even the owner of the house." But hospitality was a big reason why people would extend foot washing customs. So could it be that Jesus washed the feet of his disciples for the sake of hospitality? It was a borrowed room. Jesus had sent Peter and John to go follow somebody with a pitcher of water to somebody else's house and ask, "Hey, do you have a room we could use? It's already furnished." But it wasn't anybody's house. They borrowed it. And Peter and John were the one that fixed the meals. And really, everybody that was there, it's kind of like family. His 12 brothers and the teacher. So it really wasn't a host-guest relationship, although there's probably some examples there for us that Jesus was maybe being hospitable. And the third and final setting for hospitality comes in the form of ritual settings. Ritual settings. It's a part of tradition. It's things that we do. It's a part of our custom, right? And I think about the soldier who guarded the tomb of the unknown soldier. I mean, for him to get dressed up required him to completely clean himself. To iron and press his uniform, maybe pay to have it done. To make sure that his weapon was completely spotless. I mean, it was a ritual of cleaning. It's one that we actually undergo. Many of us, we don't even sit down to the supper table until we do what? Wash our hands. And believe it or not, that actually moves from hygiene to ritual because, well, we're used to washing our hands, but it actually is a part of our ritual. Before we can sit down at the table, we go to the bathroom or the kitchen to wash our hands. In Exodus chapter 30, the Lord instructs Moses about how the high priests are to function. Verse 17, you find it says this: "Make a bronze wash basin with a bronze stand. Place it between the tabernacle and the altar. and fill it with water. And listen to this. Aaron and his sons will wash their hands and feet there. They must wash this water whenever they go into the tabernacle to appear before the Lord, and when they approach the altar to burn up their special gifts to the Lord. Or they will die. That's harsh. That was expected. Before you go into the presence of the Lord and offer sacrifice, you are to be at the base and wash your hands and feet. So while there are good hygiene reasons why Jesus might have washed the feet of his disciples, while there's good hospitality reasons for why Jesus washed the feet of his disciples, I really believe that Jesus washed the feet of his disciples for ritual reasons. Just as Aaron and the priests were to prepare to enter the presence of God. Jesus was preparing his disciples specifically for priesthood. Priesthood. Yes, priesthood. If you remember in Exodus 19, whenever God is talking to Moses, he actually says, give them a message that if they obey my covenants, there'll be a kingdom of priests. The people of Israel, if they'll just keep the covenants, there'll be a kingdom of priests. Well, yeah, that's the people of Israel. Well, Peter reiterated it to the church in 1 Peter 2. He says, you're not like that, for you are a chosen people. You're a royal priesthood, a holy nation, and God's very own possession. I believe that when Jesus was washing the feet of his disciples, he was preparing them for priesthood. I think there's two reasons to go with that. The first one is this. He was preparing his disciples to enter the presence of the Lord. What is to take place over the next 2 days, really 24 hours, is going to be incredible. And when the moment, if you'll remember, the moment that Christ said, it is finished, you remember that the hand of God reached down and split the veil in half to separate the Holy of Holies from everybody else. And before that could happen, I believe that Jesus said, my disciples need to be priests first. Secondly, I believe Jesus washed their feet, not only to prepare them to enter into the presence of the Lord, but also to prepare them as they present an offering of the sacrificial lamb. Now this is where, I'm not stretching it, but you got to follow my thought process, okay? These were Jesus' best friends. And in just about an hour or two, Jesus would say to his best friends, let's go for a walk. And they would walk to the garden. And there at the garden's edge, Jesus would say to Peter, James, and John, why don't you three come with me? They enter into the garden, and they get to the center of the garden where Jesus would kneel down to pray. And he would say, why don't you guys wait right here? And as you wait right here, will you pray with me? And then Jesus would go just a little bit further away and would pray. And at that moment, Jesus knew that the enemy was rallying up an offensive and was on their way, coming to arrest Jesus. And it would be there where Jesus' disciples had been prepared to abandon the sacrificial lamb. Jesus was preparing his disciples for priesthood to enter into the presence of God and to make an offering. preparing them for priesthood. Which requires presentation. Which requires preparation. Which requires a foot washing. To enter into the presence of God meant wash your feet. Here's where it gets really crazy. You got to remember here. Jesus calls us to be priests. So for us to be priests, we are to be prepared. But do you really mean a foot washing? You really mean we got to wash our feet? Well, maybe not a physical sense, but maybe a mental and spiritual sense, yes. There's a mental preparing that has to take place in coming into the presence of God, which I don't know about you, but that's my desire for the church. That's our purpose, is to enter into the presence of God. And to do so means we have to be prepared to enter into. You can't just fall into, oh, Jesus, I didn't see you here. No, that won't happen. So what does it mean to have a mental foot washing? A mental preparing for priesthood. What does it mean? I think there's three parts. Same. First is hygiene. Hygiene? Yeah, hygiene. Now let me explain how this works. God, is there anything that I have stepped in this week that's still stuck to my... God, has my journeys this week brought me through some really rough times? Have I stepped in mud that I don't know about? God, is there anything about what's on my shoes that I need to take care of? Cecil read something like this earlier. Search me, O God, and know my heart. Try me and know my anxious thoughts. See if there be anything stuck on my shoes that needs to be cleaned off. And lead me in the path of everlasting life. Hygiene. God, is there anything on me that's keeping me from experiencing you? Because I need to deal with this. Second, hospitality. You see somebody across the room and you know their story. Maybe you know they've had a rough week. Maybe you know that they've got some challenges that are in their story. Maybe you can kind of see, wow. And there's a part of how this works is that you pray for that person. God, help them to experience you today. And Lord, if there's something that they're dealing with, help them to deal with. Maybe it means you simply spend time with that person. I love you. I'm sorry you're dealing with this. How can I help? Is there something going on that I can pray with you about? It's an attitude of hospitality. It's a mindful, mental, foot-washing preparation for the priesthood. And the third one. It's ritual. I go back to the soldier guarding the tomb of the unknown soldier. They were on 30-minute rotations, which meant that whenever the guard was preparing to come out, he was preparing out of ritual. And he looked good. But to be honest with you, looking good wasn't the focus. Looking good wasn't the wasn't the end result. Looking good happened to be necessary for his job to guard the tomb of the young. But that wasn't the snap. I grew up as a child in an era when people wore nice clothes, Sunday go-to-meeting clothes, to go to church. It's one of the reasons why I dressed up. Do you remember the day when men wore suits to church? Do you remember the day when women wore dresses and, to the nines? Do you remember those days? Here's my question to you. Why did they do that? Was it simply because that's what we did? Hang with me. Or was it because they had prepared for priesthood to enter into the presence of God? You see, the ritual part of this mental foot washing is, God, as I'm walking in those doors back there, I forget what I'm wearing. I can be wearing shorts and flip-flops, but God, is my heart ready? Have I entered into an attitude of, God, I want to experience you today when I come into this place? That's the question. Ritual is not about looking good. Ritual is not about code. It's about being prepared to enter into the presence of God. And by the way, it's also for the purpose of preparing to present an offering, which is important. And we're going to talk about just for a second. You see, God requires and demands of us to give a tithe, which is 10% of our income. That's required. But an offering is different. You see, when you offer, and I believe this is what Jesus is training priests to do. When you offer, you're saying, whatever you want. Here's my time. Here's my talent. Here's my treasure. You do with me as you will. And I offer it to you. You've got full charge. You've got carte blanche with my stuff. Because it's your stuff. So Jesus is preparing his disciples for priesthood. For the purpose of entering into the presence of the Lord. For the purpose of giving an offering. I think now, Sharon. You know, next week, we get to baptize some people. We get to baptize 3 right now. It's on my list. I'd love to baptize more. This coming Wednesday evening at 6:30, I want to talk to those, by the way, about baptism. But next Sunday, I'm just going to warn you, I'm not going to be wearing this. Okay? I'm not going to be wearing this. My question for us as we prepare to close is ultimately, why are we here? Why have we come into his house and gathered in his name? To worship him, yes. But logically, it works best to worship him if he is here. So, therefore, I would argue that we've come into his house and gathered in his name in order to enter into the presence of God. But what about out there? What about Monday through Saturday? What if every morning when you woke up, you began praying, God, want to experience your presence today with me, where I go, in what I do. May I experience your presence in my day. Search me, O God. Know my heart. Try me. Know my thoughts. See if there be any wicked way, and lead me in a path everlasting. Lord, prepare me to be a sanctuary where the Spirit of God will be happy to reside within. That's why I believe Jesus washed the feet of his disciples, to prepare them for priesthood, to enter into the presence of God, and to make an offering. Won't you stand with me? I want to pray for you. My Father God in heaven, at very best, we are finite, human, and fragile beings. And Lord, I pray, dear Father, today that we would take into consideration this idea that you have called us to be royal priests. And dear Father, I pray today, may we be quick to begin to pray. If this is what you've called me to, then Jesus, would you do a work on me, dear Father? Have your way in my life. Search me, O God, and know my heart. We're going to close singing a simple little chorus. It says, Lord, prepare me to be a sanctuary, tried and true.